once in a many lifetime opportunity in terms of changes in the logistics business, is going to have a profound effect on transportation investment. I personally believe, as a member of the cabinet and somebody who's very proud of the fact that we've paid down $3.5 billion in the state's debt, which is an extraordinary accomplishment in this economy, and it's the reason why the state has protected its stellar credit rating. I would say that there will be no better time in our lifetime to make the type of investments in public infrastructure than what we're seeing right now. We're at a point with interest rates, bond ratings, the fact that we have paid down old debt and refinanced current debt on a host of things. Now is the time for us to make smart investments and smart leveraging decisions of the public resources to prepare our state for the next generation. That would be in transportation infrastructure, but also in a host of other things. One of the things that we rolled out 2 weeks ago at our Energy Summit was a call for a greater investment in education infrastructure. If we're going to solve the age-old question on materials design and making continued improvements in efficiencies in transportation, whether it's in maritime transportation or rail transportation or fleet transportation of vehicles, if we're going to stay on the cutting edge of the LNG and CNG revolution and how that potentially impacts mobility, if we're going to have the answers to all those questions, if our kids are going to be competitive, if we're going to be more than a reward or a prize for a life well lived for people from other states, if we're going to be the state where people actually build their careers and raise their families and create their businesses, we've got to continue to invest in education. And so one of the things that we called on was slashing the sales tax on businesses in half, dedicating the half that remains to education infrastructure, bricks and mortar projects for K through university, and then eliminating the other half, which puts us in a much more competitive position with our southeastern competitors. That's really who we are up against. I mean, as Washington's dysfunction continues, the state's policies are going to become increasingly more important and more relevant in terms of where capital flows. And so it's much more important for us to be concerned about what Texas is doing or what Tennessee's doing or what the Carolinas are doing than what the Rust Belt's doing or what New England's doing, because that capital is going to flow to the Sun Belt because of our tax policies, our labor policies, our cost of living, our quality of life. And so making sure that we're on the cutting edge of not just infrastructure investment, but also education investment is going to keep Florida on the cutting edge of winning that fight day in and day out for new businesses and new investments. So the water policy issues have to be resolved. We have to have a policy in place for the state of Florida that's flexible, because this year we've been talking about too much water. 2 years ago, if I were giving this speech, we'd have been talking about not enough water. So you can't have a drought water policy and a flood water policy. You need a water policy that allows for changing circumstances in terms of a state that on average gets 50 inches of rain, but this year got 100 before September, and you don't know if it's going to rain again between now and the end of the year in any consequence. So it's got to be flexible. It's got to be comprehensive. It can't just be a Southeast Florida policy. It can't just be a Panhandle policy. It needs to be applicable to the entire state, and it has to be long-term. You can't do water policy for on an election cycle basis. You can't do water policy by fiscal year. It's got to be long-term in terms of really having a long-time horizon to prepare our state for the types of investments in reclaimed water, reuse water, eventually desal as the technologies improve and those costs continue to come down, because we can't just keep putting new straws in the ground and expecting that we're going to be able to sustain the type of growth that we all want to see in the state. That will drive Lake Belt decisions, that will drive mining decisions, that will drive ag investment, that will in turn drive decisions and the ability to have investments in transportation infrastructure as well. And then on the energy side, we have to recognize the profound changes that are going on as a result of the natural gas and the shale gas revolution in this country. We are in a state that doesn't have the luxury of purchasing electricity from other states. We got to produce what we need. We can't just go next door to our neighbor. It doesn't work like that in a peninsula. We live in a state that is the second most dependent in the country on natural gas for electricity generation. We have zero storage capacity. We have 2 pipelines bringing in 90% of the gas. The state made a major step forward last week by approving a third pipeline that'll bring another 1 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas in. But if we want to have greater mobility, greater fleet powered by either CNG or LNG, we don't want to continue to be dependent on two tubes that both originate in the Gulf Coast that are susceptible to all kinds of supply disruptions for a just-in-time delivery of something that's driving 60% of our power generation in the state. That's not smart. And so investing in storage, investing in liquefaction, making sure that we have policies in place that broaden our portfolio in terms of how we take advantage of the shale gas revolution is going to be particularly important. Energy is the lifeblood of the U.S. economy, and in a state that doesn't really produce any energy, I mean, we import all of our feedstocks, whether it's coal or oil or natural gas. Florida is particularly susceptible to supply disruptions. And to continue the type of momentum that we've built as we come out of this economic calamity, energy is going to be a driving force of that, and obviously it is hand in hand with sustainability. How we gather it, how we transport it, how we store it, how we burn it, how we use it to burn it more cleanly and get more miles out of it in the case of mobile fuels, or get more BTUs out of it, more kilowatt hours out of it in terms of electricity generation, are going to be key questions for the state of Florida as we move forward. All of these things are inseparable from your businesses. I mean, we need growth in the state of Florida to support our economic model. We need ways of getting people to our state. We want people to stay here longer when they get here and be more than just visitors. We want them to create the businesses, create the jobs, develop the new manufacturing techniques, grow the mines, grow the agricultural products, lure 100 million tourists, as the governor has said, and all of that depends on continued investment in infrastructure so that people have a pleasant experience when they are here. To support that growth and support the quality of life, sustainability has to be a key factor in those decisions. And I think that events like this give us that opportunity to continue to make those investments in a smart way, to try to continue to find that right balance between sustainability and the type of growth that we all want to see as we continue to recover from the collapse of the real estate market and the financial markets 5 years ago. And I think it's important on the political side that we continue to have people who are problem solvers willing to take those things on. What we've witnessed in Washington over the last several years, but in particular over the last several weeks, is an embarrassment. And I say that as somebody who served 10 years in the Congress. Florida will continue to distinguish itself if we remain focused on problem solving. Solving the infrastructure challenges, solving the education challenges, solving the water challenges, solving the energy challenges. And there will be disagreements. Nobody's naive about this. There'll be disagreements between North Florida and South Florida, between the coast and the interior. But if we're focused on solving that problem, rather than just throwing rocks at each other, we're going to make a lot more progress, and we will be the state that is more than just a prize for a life well lived someplace else. We will distinguish ourselves as the state that welcomes business, welcomes investment, welcomes visitors from around the world, and offers them the type of quality of life that sustainable building practices and sustainable growth practices will continue to ensure. So those are just a few thoughts from the Ag Commissioner on water and energy and transportation investment. I appreciate what you're doing, and if y'all get this whole thing worked out about asphalt and concrete, jot it down, because we're going to move to Middle East peace next. So I hope you enjoy your lunch, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you.
Let's thank the Commissioner one more time for spending time out of his busy schedule with us. Thank you, Commissioner Putnam. We're now going to move outside for lunch buffet. There are buffets set up on both sides, left and right. Restrooms are on this side. get your lunch, come back in so that we'll hear our lunch